First of all, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm going to do my best to get us back on track. I tell people I'm Italian, but only on my parents' side. I'm probably the only one here with a tie, so one other person, and I'm probably one of the older ones except for Ted, who's sitting over here, and he doesn't even have a tie on. And you'll hear from him later in the days or so. But, you know, we never coordinated these presentations, okay? So some of the things I'm going to talk about are going to touch upon. By the way, the slide that you saw, I was in that 6% when they had the baby boomer slide. So that, I'm way on that far with Ted. He's over there with me. But the good news is on that salary one, I'm up above the 70,000. So from that standpoint, I'm doing okay. I've been involved with unmanned systems and robotics for over 28 years. And this is a revolutionary technology on an evolutionary pace. And, you know, we've heard from VJ, and VJ and I are known acquaintances for a while back now, is I am one of those people that, again, this is probably the only audience that I will say the word drone to, because you folks get it. But I'm going to tell you something. You're not normal, okay? And when I say that is you understand. They did a poll, and they said, and they had 20 different pictures of unmanned aircraft vehicles. And they had the word drone, and they said, click to what you think represents that word. Over 80% of them picked a Predator with a Hellfire missile. Now, in this audience, you recognize that's not what you mean when you say the word drone. But drone gives a connotation: large, military, hostile, weaponized, autonomous. That's what the average person thinks when they hear that word. Again, you're not average. The good thing is you're above average. So that's a good thing. So the reason that we don't use that word drone is the other thing is we call them unmanned aircraft systems. The reason being is that when you say a system, it's comprised of multiple different pieces. The thing that actually flies is only 30%. It carries a mission package payload, it has a communication link between it has a ground station, but most importantly, there's a human being, either in the loop, on the loop, but involved with the system. And that's a key and critical piece to this. Now, normally when I give these presentations, I talk about two things. I talk about the tremendous potential upside of UAS, and I talk about privacy. Well, if you look at your agenda, you're going to be talking about all of those in detailed, in minutiae, in the next couple of 3 days. And that's good, because that's what's important about this conference. I was supposed to be in Chicago with my grandson for a one-year birthday party, but instead I'm here for at least 2 days. And then I'll go out there, and then I go to Kansas to meet with Senator Moran. But the reason I think this is important, because you folks are the future. Okay? You folks are the ones that are looking at this technology and understanding the applications. So let me actually get into the presentation now. So what I thought I would do, and I can't get away from those two things that I normally talk about, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a notion of when you talk about an innovative technology or a revolutionary type technology, it's not most of the time by a new widget or a new gadget. What normally happens is you take 2 or 3 different other technologies and build upon something that already existed to a point where now you've made it affordable, safe, and available. And we've talked about in the first three presentations that you've seen here today. Okay, well, Buddy, you did a great job with the Nokia phone, but I'm older, okay? Samuel F.B. Morse came up with this, okay? And this telegraph was the ability for the first time to send electricity through a wire for communication. It later became a telegram. And from that, Alexander Graham Bell patented in 1876 the first telephone, okay? So now, and with that became a tremendous capability. But it wasn't until almost 100 years later that Motorola in 1970s, in the early 1970s, came up with a cellular phone. So 100 years went by where you had a capability, but now all of a sudden, you have this capability that is going to allow the world. Right now we have about 7 billion people in the world. 6 billion people have access to a cellular phone. Okay, you've skipped generations of hard wiring for communications because of this technology. And I understand, I see some of the folks in here that I've seen before, and I'm like VJ, when I was testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, there was a sign that said, fire Toscano. So my mom wasn't too pleased with that one, but that's what happens sometimes. But this technology, when it became cellular, when it became that you were now going through wavelengths instead of a hard wire, you were giving up privacy. You were more vulnerable now that communication that you were having was more vulnerable now, but this technology allowed not just the rich or the people that had hard wire or only less than 23% of the world, but now 6 billion out of 7 billion people have the ability to communicate. So there was always going to be a trade-off that you're going to have to see as technology goes forward. Again, I thought I had 20, 25 minutes, and they told me I only had 12, so I'm going to use up some of the other ones that the other people didn't use. But you recognize this, okay? This is a Model T. Now, the first automobile was in 1886, is when they pretty much say we had the first automobile. But it was a luxury, and it could only be afforded by the rich. Very few out there. It wasn't until Henry Ford came up with mass production, okay, and that was the early 1900s. 1901 to 1903 is when they said that happened. And he actually could build one of these in 93 minutes, okay? So all of a sudden, that technology becomes available to the masses because of a new technology or different technologies that come in that make it affordable, make it available, as you heard before, to the masses. And once that happened, what happened? Well, now we're at a point where we have so much congestion in the world for automobiles. We have 6.3 million accidents in the United States. We have 32,000 lives that are lost each year, and it costs us $256 billion a year in medical costs and damages. But yet we get in our car and drive every day. Okay? In the world, we have 1.2 million people that die every year. Right now, there are places where, well, in the U.S., every licensed driver has a car. That's how big this is. So now the question is, how do we take this technology that basically over 100 years has gotten us to the point where what you're talking about is mobility. Mobility for everybody, and doing it in a much more effective and efficient way. The numbers are staggering when you talk about congestion that we're talking about. So now we have things like driverless cars, automated vehicles. And depending upon who you talk to, it could be anywhere from 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, 15 years when we're going to have these vehicles available to us. And again, it'll allow people to go from point A to point B in a much more effective, efficient manner, a much more cost savings manner, much, much better for the environment, and a lot of good benefits that go with it, and you're going to hear more about those things for all unmanned systems. But for any unmanned system, safety is paramount, okay? Everything else we talk about, if you don't have safety first, nothing else matters. Privacy is important. Insurance is important. Profit is important. Jobs are important. But if you don't have safety, you'll never field these systems. And so what we have to determine, what is the risk acceptance? Well, I just told you what the risk acceptance is for the automobile today. It's 32,000 lives, 6.3 million accidents. If that wasn't acceptable, we wouldn't be driving our cars every day. So we don't know what that is for unmanned systems. And we do have an aversion to a machine killing a human being. And so this is something that we will have to grow through in life. Now, that chart that was up, that Deloitte's put up, that Matt was showing that he was talking to, is I also, and we'll be hopping on a plane later this weekend and going to Chicago to see my one-year-old grandson. But he has a brother, and his brother is 2.5 years old. Well, Joseph is what I call a digital native. At 13 months of age, he knew how to use an iPad. And he calls me on his mom's phone because he picks out the picture and hits it and says, Papa, Papa. Okay? He is a digital native. Ted and I were digital immigrants. Okay? We migrated to this technology. We weren't born with it. I can guarantee you, when Joseph hits 16 years of age, and you tell him that he has to get in a car and drive for an hour and a half, and not be connected and not be texting, he'll have convulsions. He will not be able to handle it. He will demand. Right now, they did a survey between 16 and 25. If you had to give up the internet or give up the car, which would you do? They'd give up the car, 68%. Okay? That generation is wired in, and they will not, and I will tell you that texting is not the distraction. The distraction is driving, because they want to be texting, but they have to get from point A to point B, sometimes to go to class. I know that's what they tell me. So this is what you're facing. This is what you're going up to. So right now, all that technology that was built into the smart cars that we have today. So when you talk about stabilization, you talk about all of the gyros that are put into these systems for the braking and the coordination of the cars and whatnot, it's now being applied in autopilots. Okay, that GPS that you have in these cell phones is now being put into these technologies to understand location to fly from point A to point B. So it's a bunch of different technologies that are finally coming together to have this revolutionary effect in an evolutionary fashion. That's what we're talking about when you talk about unmanned aircraft systems. We talked about a lot of the good uses. And here again, this is the picture actually of the floods that they were having in Colorado, that they did use a UAS to put it all together. You're going to hear all day today, tomorrow, and probably on Sunday, we'll be talking about all the great advantages because it takes you out of those 4 Ds, the dirty, dangerous, difficult, and dull missions that exist that we don't want to send human beings into. When you had the Fukushima incident took place, those 70 men that went into that plant knew that they were going to die. Okay? That was not necessary. There's technology that exists today that will allow you to do what you needed to do under those circumstances. This technology will save lives, save money, and save time. Okay? There's tremendous applications which you've already started hearing about, and you folks probably get it more than most. This is the big one. Okay? This is agriculture. And I'm sorry Chris Anderson isn't going to be here because I think he was going to talk about this as well. Right now, we have about 7 billion people in the world. They predict by the year 2050, 37 years from now, we're going to have 9 billion, a net increase of 2 billion people. There is not enough food to feed everybody. They predict that you got to have at least a 70% increase in production. Precision agriculture. We estimated that 80% of all UAS in the first 10 years will be used for precision agriculture. Okay? And I'll tell you right now, from a safety standpoint, it's ideal because you got hundreds of thousands of acres, not a whole lot of human beings. And seriously, corn doesn't mind if you watch it. So you don't have the safety issue and you don't have the privacy issue. The 2 biggest factors right now that are facing UAS. So if you take those 2 off the table, just to do this alone is why we should be working in this field. Just doing this alone is why you want to field this, so that generations in the future will not go starving, will not go hungry. So precision ag is a big deal. Again, we saw this as well. To understand the world that we live in, to be compatible with what else exists on this planet, to understand the weather conditions and how it affects us is key and critical. Unmanned systems give you situational awareness where human beings cannot go in some cases, where it's too dirty, dangerous, or difficult. That's why you need these systems. So in this particular case, this is the worst year they had in both elephant and rhino deaths from poaching and from, in some cases, that they've gone into places where they're not supposed to go. And the tribes will then end up killing them because they've done that. Well, you can use UAS because, first of all, the elephants, they get scared of the buzzing noise. They think they're bees. And so you could actually herd elephants away from places that they're not supposed to go, even quicksand or tar pits or things of that nature. But we haven't even touched the surface of what we could do to help the environment, to help the other species that exist on this planet. Because if you try to monitor them as a human being, we give off a scent, we're very clumsy, we're very limited, we have to have protection, and we have to make it safe for us. This causes a problem. So if you want to understand how we can exist on this planet in a better way, this technology lends itself tremendously. And as we brought up before, Matternet and also the MIT folks, there is 1 billion people, that's 1/7 of the world, a population, that at some point in time, they do not have access to roads, to communications. In some places, when the monsoon season happens, there's 3 to 4 months where they are disconnected. They use this to provide medical supplies, water, cell phones, connectivity. So to be able to keep a 1/7 of the world connected, when you look at pandemic diseases, you talk about AIDS, you talk about Ebola and all the other different things that happen, you can track this stuff at the early stages, and you can monitor it, and you can help prevent it. They're actually going into the caves where the bats are that carry the diseases and bring them out, things of this nature. We haven't even touched and scratched the surface of what you're going to be able to do with this technology. I show this one here because search and rescue. Okay? This is one of the cases where whenever you hear a search and rescue mission has been called off, it's because of weather, darkness, or danger to the individuals that are actually doing the searching. These systems can operate 24/7, day, night, under all different conditions. And if you don't find people usually within the first 24 hours, you have a high probability that it's going to be a bad situation that's going to come from it. And when you stop and think, they did an analysis of in Colorado Springs. If you go 3.5 hours in any direction, you hit 29 national parks. In those 29 national parks in the year of 2012, they had over 300,000 people that were reported missing. So just alone in that particular application, don't you want to have the best capability and technology available that will allow you to find those people? So I'm on 0, the light's blinking red. We do have this website, okay, where we post a lot of these humanitarian stories. And it's unfortunate that Robbie Hood from NOAA can't be here. It's unfortunate that Ed Wagner from NASA can't be here. And I haven't talked about those other applications. I deal with the air, the ground, and the maritime for the most part, but you also have space, you have NASA, you have exploration in space, you have medical, you also have manufacturing. These are places where unmanned systems are being utilized and are going to help and change the world. So again, the reason that I have the D word difficulty is that most people don't understand, and it's fear and misunderstanding that it causes them to have a not so warm appreciation of what this technology can do. Thank you very much.